Good morning, students, and welcome to the class. Students, I am Dr. Sanjana Sharma, and I am going to teach you paper 9th B. So, students, today we are first going to understand what is the meaning, definition, scope, and history of post-colonial theory before we start analyzing the texts that are there in this paper. Students, post-colonial theory deals with the reading and writing of literature written in previously colonized countries or literature written in colonizing countries which deals with colonization or colonized people. Students, it focuses particularly on the way in which literature by the colonizing culture distorts the experiences and realities of the colonized people and inscribes inferiority of the colonized society. It also deals with the way in which literature in colonizing countries appropriates the language, images, scenes, traditions, and so forth of colonized countries. Students, post-colonial literature is a broad term that encompasses literature by people from the erstwhile colonial world as well as from the various minority diaspora that live in the West. Students, the historical period or state of affairs representing the aftermath of Western colonialism. Post-colonialism can also be used to describe the concurrent project to reclaim and rethink the history and agency of people subordinated under various forms of imperialism. Students, post-colonial theory deals with the effects of colonization on cultures and societies and these societies' responses. The term post-colonial was first used in literary studies in the Empire right back in the year 1989 that refers to cultural interactions within colonial societies. Post-colonial critics reinterpret and examine the values of literary texts by focusing on the context in which they were produced and reveal the colonial ideologies that are concealed within. Notable theories in post-colonial thought include Edward Said, who coined the term Orientalism, Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak, known for defining terms such as subaltern and essentialism, and Homi K. Bhabha, known for his discussion of cultural hybridity. So students, now the question arises, what is post-colonial literature? In a broad sense, post-colonial literature is writing which has been affected by the imperial process from the moment of colonization to the present day. As we all know that India was a colony of Great Britain. So in India's case, this includes novels, poetry, drama, which were written both during and after the British Raj, which came to a formal conclusion with Indian independence in the year 1947. Although writing from India and other formerly colonized countries such as Nigeria, Jamaica, Pakistan, and Singapore has distinctive features, post-colonial literature shares some significant concerns and characteristics. It tries to reclaim spaces and places. Colonialism was, above all, a means of claiming and exploiting foreign lands, resources, and people. Enslavement, indentured labor, and migration forced many indigenous population to move from the places that they considered home. Post-colonial literature attempts to counteract their resulting alienation from their surroundings by restoring to a connection between indigenous people and places through description, narration, and dramatization. Students, what happened? During colonization, the indigenous culture or the native people of that colony, subjected to foreign rule, were often sidelined, suppressed, and openly denigrated in favor of elevating the social and cultural preferences and conventions of the colonizers. Means they were told again and again by the ruling class that their traditions, their culture, their way of living, even their thought process, it is of no use, it is useless, it is bereft of quality, and these people, their opinions, they were sidelined. And why all this was done? To elevate the social and cultural preferences and conventions of the colonizers. So, in response, much post-colonial literature seeks to assert the richness and validity of native culture or indigenous cultures in an effort to restore pride in practices and traditions that were systematically degraded under colonialism. Students, colonizers often depicted their colonial subject as existing outside of history in unchanging, timeless societies, unable to progress or develop without their intervention and assistance. Means the ruling class, the colonizer, they thought that only they could civilize these colonized people, only they could teach them new methods, new ways to upgrade their knowledge, to upgrade their culture. In this way, they justified their actions, including violence against those who resisted colonial rule. Revising history to tell things from the perspective of those colonized is thus a major preoccupation of post-colonial writing. Students, these writers, means these post-colonial writers, use detailed description of indigenous people, places, and practices to counteract or resist the stereotypes, inaccuracies, and generalization which the colonizers circulated in educational, legal, political, and social texts and settings. And the language, which language has been used mostly by the post-colonial writers? This is English. You must have heard the title of a famous work, Empire Writes Back. So, these colonized people, these writers, they wrote in the language of the colonizers. They chose to write in English mostly. Many post-colonial writers chose to write in the colonizer's tongue. However, authors like Arundhati Roy deliberately play with English, remolding it to reflect the rhythms and syntax of indigenous languages and inventing new words and styles to demonstrate mastery of a language that was, in a sense, forced upon them. So, students, post-colonialism is a term used for an era when colonies achieved freedom from European colonization. Bill Ashcroft and his other companion authors have written in The Empire Writes Back that more than 3/4 of the people living of the world today have had their lives shaped by the experience of colonialism. What they meant to say, that more than three-quarters of the generation of the whole world, they have been colonized by these powers. Though there was a political change, many nations got independence and no more they are colonies, but culturally and economically there appeared many dilemmas and crises. They were still in confusion about their culture and identity. In fact, colonialism was not only power control, but it was a cultural control by the colonizer, in which still colonized people were tied to. The struggle of the colonized subjects for their cultural identity and the social formation of the new independent nations was an aspect of cultural transformation that led to a conflict with the colonizers' culture. Many of those countries were in economic and cultural crisis. What characterizes post-colonial era is the resistance to colonialism and seeking identity to confirm their independence. The movement of people, migration from former colonies to the colonizers' countries, created new mixed hybrid society that clash with each other culturally in one hand, and in other hand between the citizens and migrants clashes are there. Bill Ashcroft has written that all post-colonial societies are still subject in one way or another to overt or subtle form of neo-colonial domination, and independence has not solved this problem. So students, I would like to give you some examples of prominent texts that fall under the term post-colonial literature. Some of them are Samuel Beckett's Murphy, Gabriel Garcia Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude, Salman Rushdie's Midnight Children, Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart, Toni Morrison's Beloved, Arundhati Roy's The God of Small Things, and other names are there on the screen, you can see them. Students, Shakespeare's Othello, Antony and Cleopatra, and Tempest have been taken as key texts for the application of post-colonial modes of analysis. This suggests that the post-colonial literature is a broad term that encompasses literature by people from the erstwhile colonial world as well as from the various minority diaspora that live in the West. Post-colonialism has also been a term used to reinterpret Western canonical literature from a variety of fresh and diverse perspectives. So students, this much for today. We will continue this discussion in our next class as well. Thank you very much.